Welcome to IBI. This video gave a more detailed description of how IBI works and how you can control your data through the IBI application. If you'd like to see a general overview of IBI, please visit howdoyoubi.com and click on the link to see our general video posted to YouTube. Now let's take a closer look at IBI. IBI is an application that is an add-in to Microsoft Excel and works with Excel versions 2010 and higher. As you can see, if we come to our normal Excel layout, the IBI is a new ribbon tab. We can control the IIS server that IBI works through on this application by clicking into the admin and then configuring our hosting options through here. As you can see, this particular instance is set up to work with this machine's local IIS server. You can control the IIS server by inputting the correct values here after you've installed IBI on an IIS server. After that, once you've installed the plugin uses this information to control which data it has access to, and particularly which access the user has access to. So we'll go ahead and close this. Once we've configured our IIS settings through the admin tab, we can go ahead and launch the IBI application. You can see when we first launch the application, we're presented with the data zone selector screen. What data zones are in IBI are ways to control what users have access to what data. So for instance, if you have one database that only a few users have access to, you can control that through the data zone so that when they select it, they're only presented with the data zones that they have access to. However, data zones can also be a combination of databases, a subset of a specific database where you want users to have some access to information but not all of it. So that's how you can control your data through the data zones. And in this instance, we're working with two separate instances of the AdventureWorks sample database from Microsoft. However, we have some edits that we've made to each of these individual data zones that are particular to them, and so the data we return from these is not going to be the same. In this example, we'll go ahead and click on BikeWorks. When we open up the IBI application, we can also expand and contract the screen however big that we want it, and the screen size scales with the application. Items that can be used by different users of IBI to create queries and return values are divided into classes and objects. Classes are all the main items you have here in the classes and objects section, and objects are the individual items contained within those classes. So every class has 1 to n number of objects. And what can be done is selecting an object. So for instance, if we double click this object, it comes into our selected objects window. And you can also see at that time what happens to different classes within here. And so, for instance, call center, customer total sales, internet sales, sales, and survey response are all marked in white font, and you can see we can no longer expand these classes. And this is because within the metadata of IBI, we've gone ahead and notated that if someone selects something from reseller sales class, then we don't want them to be able to select anything from classes call center, customer total sales, internet sales, sales, and survey response. And the reason we've done that is because we've marked these as incompatible because the values contained within these particular classes if we tried to add them into a query and ran the query would error out. And so just to avoid that and to avoid user confusion, as soon as you select something that's incompatible with something over here, that object or that class is automatically marked as incompatible. And so you can see if we expand currency, we can do this at the class level, mark them as incompatible, and we can do that at the object level. So some objects within a class are aggregates. For instance, this total average rate, this is marked within the iBI metadata as an aggregate. It's a sum of, or it's an average of all the rates within the currency table. So we have to individually mark some of these as incompatible with something in the reseller sales class and vice versa. So if it's a non-aggregate and it's marked as an incompatible, all non-aggregates within that class are marked with as incompatible. However, if it's an aggregate value, it has to individually be added as a incompatibility with the selected object and class that you've added to the selected objects window. And that can all be managed through the metadata. So now if we run this, we get a notification the query is completed. And if we move the iBI window over, or we drop it down here, we can see that here are all the sales order numbers from the reseller sales class. Now this doesn't give us much information, so what we can do is go ahead and unselect that, and you can see all our incompatibilities go away, and we can actually open up one of the queries that we have saved. And we can see we've got this particular query for the BikeWorks data zone. So we'll go ahead and open that. And once we've done that, you can see that we've got our selected objects. We've got them marked as ascending and descending depending on what our needs are. We've got a filter added, and we can talk about that in a minute. And you can see automatically again our incompatibilities have all been added. So we don't have any type of confusion over what objects are related to one another and can be used within the same query. Now this query will give us a little bit more detailed information. So you can see that our spreadsheet updates automatically with the new information, and we've got it grouped by product name, employee title, and our sales amount. And so that's all good to go. And as soon as someone updates this information within the actual database that we're querying, in this case the AdventureWorks database, we could click the refresh spreadsheet or refresh workbook buttons here, and this information would all be updated. So now let's talk about how we can control this particular filter and potentially add in our own filters based on what we've got in our selected objects window to get the query results that we're expecting. Let's say, for instance, that this query is not, or this filter is not a part of the query. So go ahead and get rid of that. But we know we want to filter this particular query by product name. And we'll go down to the product class, scroll down, and we'll find product name, and now we'll just drag this name over to our filtered objects. And at this point you can see, okay, the filtered object is added there, and now we have to choose an operator in order to conduct the filter. And again, all these filters are added in via the metadata and controlled. So for instance, this is a text type or varchar field, and so through the metadata we can control, okay, if someone selects a varchar text type field, what operators are available. And so again, some of these wouldn't be available if you selected like a numeric value or an int or something of that sort. So that's how we can control what's displayed in this operators list. So we can go ahead and click on equal to. We see that the operator changes to equal to. And now we'll go ahead and put in that. And we can keep adding more filters and more filters if we wanted to. So we could drag in start dates. We could do something from employee title, so we could filter this by one of these particular titles. We just drag this down into here, and we can control whether or not it's an or and statement with these filters. And so if we click go here, our query will run. And you can see we have our results. And in the messages tab, you can see that if we expand this, we can see the results of our query. So our query results are running, and we're getting our SQL back as well as our expected results within the window. So at this point, we can go ahead and save this query if we wanted to. We could do save as, go into our IBI queries folder, and we could overwrite this particular query. We won't do that just because it's the same query that we ran previously, but that's how you save a query. Now, what happens to this information once we've run the query and then something happens on the database where this amount is updated? Well, we can go over to SQL Server, and we'll just, the database that we're working with, we'll say update that to 8300. And then we can go ahead and run this query again. And now that query updates with the new value based upon the information that we added back. And what's great about this is once you've saved that IBI query, that IBI file, we can go ahead and send that to anybody else via email or share a file or SharePoint, whatever you want to do, however you share your files. And if that person has IBI on their machine and they're connected to the same data zone via the admin tool, they can run that query and get the same results. And then as soon as someone updates the results on the database, they can go ahead and refresh that query again and get the same results as you are. Now what happens if after we run this query, we're happy with it, and we like this workbook and we want to save it? So we'll call this test workbook 01, and we'll add it to our desktop. And we'll go ahead and close this down. And now let's go ahead and change this back to the amount that we had before. Go ahead and execute that. We'll open up Excel. We'll go ahead and open up this workbook. And now when we go to the IBI tool, we go ahead and refresh spreadsheet. And our amounts are updated based upon what we just did to the SQL server database that we've been working against. And for instance, if we had multiple sheets with different queries, so you can add an IBI query to this spreadsheet, you can add an IBI query to this spreadsheet, and so on and so forth. And if we had that kind of situation, we can just go ahead and refresh workbook, and everything would refresh, not just this particular spreadsheet. We've talked about using the IBI file format to go ahead and save the IBI query that you create, and then being able to email it or somehow share it with someone else who has the IBI and access to the same data zone in their local environment. However, what if you've created an Excel workbook with multiple sheets from different IBI queries, and now you're concerned that that data might have changed in the database? You know, there's increased sales over time or something, and you want to rerun the queries, but you've already got this saved and formatted in a nice workbook with pivot charts and pivot tables and that sort of thing. Do you have to redo the entire thing? Well, no, not with IBI. You only have to refresh the workbook because when you create the workbook values using IBI, IBI automatically stores the metadata necessary to go ahead and retrieve that data from the database and update it if necessary. So let's take a look at this. We've got a test chart here where we've got a product name and internet sales amount by gender for a certain product name. And then on this sheet, we've got some more information about reseller sales, the employees who've done those sales, and the product name associated with those sales. And then we've got an actual pivot table and chart here detailing the values from sheet 2 in a nicely formatted chart. So what if these changes? What if these values change on the database? Let's go ahead and try that. So let's go ahead and 23, and we'll go ahead and make that change. Go back to our Excel, and now we'll go ahead and make sure these things change. So you can see here's total here for female went down from 17,000 to 9,500, and from 42,000 went to 44,000 for this. However, you'll notice this hasn't changed. So only thing we have to do with the pivot table is just do a quick refresh, and we can see that that's changed to 44,000, and that's changed to 44,000 as well. So as long as you create the worksheet using IBI queries and you save that, and now you can send this Excel spreadsheet to someone else. You can put it up on SharePoint, and someone else with IBI and access to the data zone again that is necessary to run the query. If they have access to that, then they can automatically refresh the workbook as well. And the only thing you have to do is update the pivot chart as well. And so IBI makes it really easy and straightforward to automatically update your workbooks and spreadsheets in Excel if you've created those queries using the simple IBI interface, dragging and dropping your values. We hope you've enjoyed this video on IBI, and it's been able to show you how easy IBI is to use within Excel to create complex data sets just by dragging and dropping a few objects to the screen. And moreover, it lets your users control that data and how they want it formatted in Excel, and then they can automatically update that data when it changes and share that data between other users of IBI. It makes it simple for the IT team to control who has access to data, and on the user end, it makes it really easy to create the data sets that they need without knowing how to write complicated SQL syntax. We hope you've enjoyed this video, and for any other questions, please visit our website, howdoyoubi.com. Thank you.